Hello, hello everyone. Can you please take your seats, please? We're about to start. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, friends. Okay, let's start. Good morning to you all. I am Manuel Pulgar-Vidal, chairman of the newly created IUCN Climate Crisis Commission. So I am very happy of that. And today we will have our first event ever. This is an event not only to present the Climate Crisis Commission, but also to discuss how much this commission could help us to address the intertwined crisis. So we will have two segments. We will have an introduction of Stuart McGuinness, Deputy Director General of IUCN. Also, I am very happy that we have Bruno Oberle, Director General of IUCN. Thank you, Bruno, for joining us. And after that, we will have a fantastic panel. And the idea for today it is to define and to explore with you all how much an IUCN Climate Crisis Commission can help us and can help the world to address the intertwined crisis. So I don't want to take more time, but just to go into Stuart, and then I will moderate the panel. So Stuart, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Manuel. So it's a real pleasure to be here. And for those of you who maybe don't know IUCN, I'm going to very quickly give you an overview, a quick synopsis of why a new commission is actually quite a big deal. Now, first of all, IUCN is a union. Many of you are members. I see some members, and that's our real potential. We've got states, government agencies, more recently subnational jurisdictions, indigenous peoples organizations, and NGOs. But then also we've got the Brains Trust, which are our 7 expert commissions. The reason why a new commission is a big deal is because we haven't had a new one for over 50 years. In fact, when the members took a decision in Marseille to create a new commission, we were scrambling a little bit to say, what's the precedent? How do we work this through? And I say, I'm very glad now we are at this point where we can now have our first formal event as a new climate crisis commission. I would say that the importance of having a climate crisis commission really does highlight where we are globally at the minute. And I will come back actually to the cover decision in COP26, and I will come back to what's on the screen here. The recognition that we can't deal with climate over here and biodiversity loss over there. These two crises are interlinked. And we now need expertise. We need to be able to gather expertise from around the world to really focus on that. Now, I want to just give a quick emphasis, and then I'll pass to the panel discussion, which is the more interesting part rather than hearing me speak. But what the value of a commission? Those of you who know IUCN will know several of our commissions. We've got one on law, protected areas, communication. I want to just highlight a couple of the impact that some of our commissions can have. Our Species Survival Commission obviously does all the assessments for the red list of threatened species, which you know. Now, what the red list obviously is the authoritative documentation of the risk of extinction of species and different taxonomic groups. But without the red list, it's estimated that extinction rates would be 4 times higher than they are already over the work. And why is that? Because it's given us a focus of where to prioritize. We all know the risks, but we also know the good news stories as well. How we've seen species like the mountain gorilla or the panda actually get downgraded or downlisted in the red list because conservation action works. And that, I think that shows the real importance of having this network of experts coming together, working systematically around being able to generate conservation knowledge for the world. Another example I want to give is work that I'm very privileged to do with my good friend and colleague Angela Andrade on the Commission on Ecosystem Management. 3 weeks ago, Angela, we had a paper published in Nature after 3 years of review. The reason there was 3 years of review was because the concept was actually was radical. It was how we could actually start to understand, have a global classification for ecosystems. It's never happened before. It's been a bit of a holy grail of conservation. How we could actually classify ecosystems in a way that would be consistent, coherent, and yet would align with national classifications. We've got that. We've dealt with that now. Again, why is that important? Because it allows us to be able to assess for the first time where those ecosystems that are at real risk of collapse, and like the red list of threatened species, be able to target where we need our conservation action. This is now the next time. Now what we've got is our Climate Crisis Commission, and this is the real potential. The real potential that we now have, bringing together how we will address the climate crisis and the biodiversity loss crisis together under Manuel's leadership, really starting to mobilize expertise, getting a brains trust to help us work through not just the IUCN as a secretariat, not even just IUCN as a union, but globally starting to give leadership on dealing with this issue here. In the same way that our colleagues in ecosystem management have done, in the same way that our colleagues in the Species Survival Commission have done. So I said I won't speak much longer because we want to get on to the panel discussion, but I just want to say that this is a momentous moment. I really want to thank Manuel for putting his hand up to lead the Commission. I think we just could not have a better first chair of this Commission. So thank you very much, Manuel. And again, I think one of the things, our work doesn't start in 1 month or 6 months or a year. Our work starts now. It starts today. We've all got, I would encourage all of us, we've got an opportunity now to build momentum. If we want to see this, how a framework for integrating the action on climate loss, climate crisis and the biodiversity loss crisis, then I would contend we really need to see nature-based solutions in the formal cover decision. And so I'd really ask us now to get in there, speak to the delegates, do whatever we can to encourage this. This is what IUCN does its best as a union of members, and actually being driven by the knowledge and, I say, the brains trust from our commissions. Manuel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. So let me take 2 more minutes. I love the analogy. I love to understand well the history of the universe, of the formation of the universe, the solar system, even the Earth. And let's put the analogy of the solar system. So the only way to have a well-organized solar system, it is by having a main star. The main star, it is the key element of a system. And in our case, in the climate debate, we have clarity on what are the elements of that main star. 1.5, net zero, resilient world, even decisive decade. But sometimes the main star it is not sometimes, always, the main star it is not enough. You do need to have some gravitational forces to put the actors well in orbit. That is a key element. So in the climate debate, we have developed good gravitational forces. One of those, it is because of what science is telling us. Also, it is related to the role of non-state actors into the debate. Some gravitational force, also it is resource mobilization, financial mechanism, among many others. And when we try, if we try to do the same analogy when we move into nature, we are a bit behind. Probably we are in the time of the Big Bang. So we are looking that the GBF would be the Big Bang of this new system that should create a clear main star and also should develop the gravitational forces to start to align actors around. Nature positive could be, in my point of view, must be that main star. But also an action agenda for nature, strengthen the GEF, among many other topics, or starting to develop a more strong narrative in between nature and the economy that deserves more attention, could be those gravitational forces that we do need to have around this new main star. But the idea it is not to have two solar systems, but just one, and to put it together. So the point is how much climate, and based on what it has already developed, could contribute to define and to the formation of this nature solar system. And how much by working together based in this concept of convergence, we could exploit the potential to address the intertwined crisis. That is because of the Commission. That is the base of the Commission. To see how much by talking and by developing tools of convergence, we could address the intertwined crisis. So that is why for today we will have a great panel that I will invite to come here to the front. First we will have Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, former Minister of the Environment and Energy of Costa Rica. I don't remember the title exactly, sorry Carlos Manuel, and current CEO and Chairman of the Global, of the GEF. Please, come to the front and welcome. Also, we have Cirilata Carmila, Head of Climate Change Adaptation of UNDP. Cirilata, please. Then we will have Adair Turner, Chair of the Energy Transition Commission. Thank you, Adair, for joining us. We have Kathy Jitong Lee, that she has followed the UNFCCC process with a youth and gender lens, and also it is an ESG consultant of Deloitte. Also, we have Angela Andrade. She is chairing the Commission on Ecosystem Management. And a bit later, we will have Hindu Ibrahim, a very strong leader in IPLC rights. So this will be an exploration, friend. The idea is to explore how, based in your own expertise and recognizing the creation of this new Climate Crisis Commission with IUCN, how can we be more effective in address the intertwined crisis? So I know, Carlos Manuel, that you can't stay more than just for some more minutes, so I will start with you. Carlos Manuel, you are the CEO of the GEF. The GEF was created mostly to address biodiversity objective. But now we are talking about convergence. I have heard that you are discussing with the Green Climate Fund the potential of developing new collaborative ways to address the intertwined crisis. How much that could benefit and could make more effective our actions, and what do you suggest to the Climate Crisis Commission in relation to what you are working on?
Well, thank you so much, Manuel, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And let me congratulate IUCN for their effectiveness to fully implement Resolution 110 of our Congress last year in putting together this commission. At the same time that IUCN has been working on creating a commission that deals with this double crisis, we at the GEF went through our replenishment process. And we've been highly influenced by many organizations and many different processes. And this one, the resolution 110, and what we all work in the IUCN Congress and in COP26 had a big impact in our GFA programming proposal. And that is why we came up with a new approach in GEF with this Net Zero Nature Positive Accelerator, which is basically putting financial resources in the hands of countries so they can deal with the double crisis. You know, you will never deal with the 1.5% if you don't address the nature crisis. And let me add a third element, which is pollution. You know, pollution, chemical pollution, organic pollution continues to be one of the biggest threats around the planet. And I don't have any doubt that in the context of this new commission that is being addressed, so congratulations for this. On the other side, we got a huge challenge. Last night, the UN told us that today a baby will born, and that baby will be human 8 billion. Believe it or not, today a human being will be born, and that will be number 8 billion. When I was born in 16 of April 1960, we were around 3 billion people. And they got the right to live a decent, prosperous life. Unfortunately, they live in a world where consumption and production patterns goes beyond the capacity of the planet to cope with the resources. And we all know how concrete and challenging is the future of us. This commission, my recommendation, Manuel, for this commission, and you're a mastermind of policies and politics, and you don't understand this very well. For me, my very concrete recommendation for this commission is to deal with a major issue which I call, in a very simplistic manner, policy coherence. We need to generate the right data so we can agree on how governments create the right frameworks and incentives so all public and private investment are 100% aligned with the Paris Agreement and the new CBD framework. And we're far from there. We're way far from there. I mean, we're still in the time where the financial sector, development, or commercial financial sector are saying, we don't harm the environment anymore. But that is way from where we need to be. We need the financial sector really financing their transition on all different sectors, not just sitting here and telling us that they are not doing any harm at all. And by the way, data doesn't collaborate that precisely. So I think that this element of bringing policy coherence, where we can be able to help governments align their public and private investment with the 1.5 and the new CBD framework, is the ultimate goal that we need to achieve. From the GF perspective, the financial mechanism for the conventions, of multilateral environmental conventions, is not a matter of putting more money into the process. The GF can be 5 or 10 times bigger, that we won't be able to move the needle if we, humans, continue to invest many more resources in activities that destroy nature and contribute to climate change than what we do to make this a resilient blue and green planet. Thank you, Manuel.
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel. I love that suggestion, policy coherence. And probably that is what most of you are thinking in this COP, no? Because it is happening something a bit natural. We were all together towards the Paris Agreement, we got, and then all things started to exploit in the opposite. So now we are massive number of actors doing things, what it is fantastic. But in that level of explosion, we do need to bring coherence and to always have a collective purpose. Something that we do need to always remind, it is the importance that we are moving into the same collective purpose. And policy coherence also is related to the low-hanging fruit. There are some elements that can give us that coherence, but also the importance of addressing contentious and difficult relations in between climate and nature that are used to happening, but also to address governance. And something that, as I mentioned, Costa Rica has done, it is to integrate around a ministry different topics based on this idea of bringing that coherence. In 1 minute, could you tell us how important it is, that governance approach?
Yes, Manuel, and I need an hour, not a minute, to explain that, because we normally talk about the major market failure. The market is not reflecting positive and negative externalities of our production consumption pattern, but there's an even bigger failure, which is the institutional failure. We will never achieve our sustainability aspirations with the same institutional framework that in first place has created a problem that we want to solve today. It is, to me, incredible that we continue having agencies that work with natural resources, some of them with non-renewable natural resources, others with renewable natural resources with different visions. I used to be the Minister of Environment of Costa Rica and Energy, and I need to tell you what it was for me as a Minister of Energy to go to a meeting of Ministers of Energy of Latin America. It was really frustrating because the minister, and this was 2019, 2020, the Minister of Energy of my region are trained on oil and gas. This is what they've been trained to, and this is their mindset. In Costa Rica, we don't have a Minister of Energy that fights with the Minister of Environment in terms of the vision. We got them all together. That is why we went 100% renewable energy in the electric sector. Not only we were able to get 100% renewable energy in the electric sector, but we did it with our own resources. We never conditioned the transition for more ODA, and we thought out of the box on how we finance the transition, because Costa Rica is a high-income nation, doesn't receive a lot of money from Jeff or the others out there. So we were forced to think in a very innovative way. We put $9 billion in a period of 25 years where we were able to do the transition. And in the forest sector, it's the same thing. We double the size of the forest. We create mechanisms in the country that generated $550 million that help us do the transition. So creating the right institutional framework is needed. We need to go from this institutional framework that works on silos to a landscape institutional or seascape institutional frameworks. And this is key, so we can narrow the multiple gaps. On one side, the market failure, but here, Manuel, the institutional failure. Thanks.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel. And it is true, and we have to start to think on that, because governance, integration of governance mechanism, it is key. In Latin America, yes, Costa Rica, in an effective way, Ecuador probably in the beginning with this ecological transition ministry, are the two countries that have already started to integrate, but all the others are strongly fragmented, It is something that we can start to see by working with the Commission on Environmental Law. Cristina, you are coming, no, on how can we see the governance to integrate and to promote convergence. So I will make a change in the order. I will move to you, Adair. But also, I know that you have to run, Carlos Manuel. Thank you very much for your time. Adair Turner is a fantastic person. He's always thinking beyond lines, out of the box. Probably you all have already read this Mission Possible text report. How old? When it was written, Adair? 2018, so 4 years ago. That really showed the challenge that we have in front of us. But the title, it is saying, Mission Possible, it is still possible even in the hard-to-abate sectors to move them towards a net zero objective. And you have heard Carlos Manuel, and that is why I have changed the order, talking about the importance of integrating. So based on that and based on your experience, what can you suggest to the Commission, and how can we exploit that convergence element?
Thank you very much, Manuel. So we're talking about the links between, is this on? Is this on? closer. Okay. We're talking about the links between the energy system and climate change and all the issues of nature, biodiversity. And obviously, there are two which stand out immediately. Climate change itself could drive very destructive developments of biodiversity. It could drive deforestation, loss of crucial natural habitats, but also crucially important to realize that one of the single biggest drivers of climate change, and increasingly important over time, is deforestation, currently accounting for about 4 to 5 gigatons of emissions. The Energy Transition Commission, which I chair, our basic expertise is on energy, buildings, industry, and transport. That's where we've started, that's where we focus, and as Manuel says, we have developed an optimistic belief that we can get all of those sectors of the economy to net zero by 2050. But we've become increasingly interested in these links between the nature-based issues and the climate and energy system. And we are currently looking at it, or have looked at it, along 3 specific dimensions. And I want to just describe these quickly, suggest maybe an out-of-the-box thought, and end up with the issue of governance, which Carlo Manuel was mentioning. We are looking at 3 things. First of all, the issue of carbon removals. The IEA set out the path which was required of emissions from the energy, building, industry, and transport systems, which was compatible with 1.5 degrees centigrade. And they said that not only had we got to get net zero by 2050, but we'd got to reduce emissions by 40% by 2030. I have to tell you bluntly that I can see no way we are going to get a 40% reduction in gross emissions from those sectors by 2030. We are 2 years into this decade and we have not yet cut. Indeed, we have put out another 40 gigatons out of the remaining, 80 gigatons, 40 per year, out of the 500 gigaton budget. So in our Mind the Gap report, we argued that there had to be removals, and that though in the long term, that may well take the form of what we call engineered removals from direct air capture. In the short term, the main form of removals had to be based on reforestation and other nature-based solutions, but on a scale much bigger than is currently in plan. So that's number one of an absolutely crucial limit and a priority, and I hope the Commission will look at that issue of how we get those removals. The second big issue we're looking at is minerals and mining. The clean electrification that we need, where we think we will take the use of electricity across the world up 4 or 5 times over the next 30 years, and the decarbonisation needs a lot of minerals. It needs nickel, cobalt, manganese, lithium, iron ore, and that has an environmental impact. So we are looking in detail at the moment about what is the environmental impact of the minerals and mining required to achieve our clean electrification story. Now, the good news is that there's plenty of these minerals around in the world. Some of them are in pretty sensitive areas. Nickel, as it happened, nickel laterite, tends to be underneath tropical forests for a very actually basic chemical reason about it was a hot, sticky, wet climate which was required for the creation of that particular nickel oxide, nickel laterite. Now, we are convinced that in principle, mineral and mining can occur in an environmentally sound fashion. If you worked out how much land area is actually required for all the mines that we need, it really is pinpricks in the natural environment. But what people then argue, and I think it is an argument we really have to think about, is when you do that in a sensitive area like a tropical forest, it's not just the pinprick of the mine itself. You end up with a road, and the road becomes an arrow of development, which then tends to bring other things with it, which has a greater environmental impact. So we really need to think through the impact. We need these minerals and mines to have a zero carbon economy, but how are we going to do it in a sensitive fashion? And the third is finance. So we are looking at the totality of the issues involved in finance. We need huge flows of finance for investment in renewable energy across the world, including in developing countries. And the report by Vera Songwe and Nick Stern last week has set out the scale of that investment. But I think it's important to realize that there are two categories of those finance flows. There's some which are investment, and they need to occur, and we need to reduce the cost of capital. But at the end of the day, you invest and you get a return. But some of them are essentially what we call a subsidy or a transfer. You have somebody who has an economic interest in doing something destructive, and you have to pay them not to do it. And the most important of those is avoided deforestation. The fact is, there is an economic case for tearing down rainforests in particular, but also other areas of a sensitive and important biodiversity, and turning them over either to soya plantations or to cattle grazing. And if there's an economic interest in people doing that, you've either got to prohibit it, or you've got to pay for them not to do it. You've got to pay their opportunity cost. The challenge we face, and it is a challenge which we have really only just discovered when we've done the numbers, we think the opportunity cost of stopping that is enormous. We think it's something like 150 billion to 300 billion per annum. And we're not clear where that money is going to come from. Now, some of it will come from the voluntary carbon markets. It's essential when it comes from the voluntary carbon markets that those purchases of credits are as well as, not instead of, a path to net zero and to gross zero by the steel companies, the energy companies involved. We mustn't solve the problem of avoided deforestation by letting off the pressure for a emissions reduction in the EBIT sectors of the economy. Some will come from that, but we find it very difficult to add the numbers up. So we go back to a fundamental. Why is deforestation occurring? Deforestation is occurring to 80% because of red meat consumption. Let's be blunt, red meat consumption is driving about 7 or 8 gigatons of emissions per annum when you add the deforestation that it produces and the methane emissions. And I have to say bluntly, I can't see a way to stop the deforestation of the world unless you either get diet change or you get synthetic meat. So again, we in the Energy Transition Commission are increasingly making the links between the technologies we're looking at, the climate and energy side we're looking at, and the forest side. And I hope you will cast your eye over those big issues as well as the more tactical things that we can do to try to put a stop to destructive biodiversity loss. Finally, a comment on what Carlo Manuel mentioned about governance. It really made me think about almost every country that I know of. They have a minister of energy who is often very close to oil and gas interests. They have a minister of environment who cares about the environment. They often have a minister of agriculture who in many countries is little more than a lobbying mechanism for the agricultural industry. Maybe we should put a stop to this completely by insisting that all countries, their biggest single ministry is the Ministry for Energy, Environment and Agriculture, so that they are forced to work out the trade-offs and the integration between this, rather than each being a representative of a particular point of view.
That is why I clearly said that it is always thinking beyond lines. So this idea of needed minerals, so mining, siting, permitting for renewable energies, it is a first step to integrate. But then when we move into what is the most or the main driver of deforestation, it is even bit or one step toward this convergence and integration approach. So thank you very much, Adair. Thank you, Hindu, for being here. I forgot to really tell you all how much we appreciate your willingness of joining us, because we know how busy you are in this COP and how far away your next event it would be. So 100 meters to move to one event to the other. So then move to you. You are working with UNDP. What it is interesting with UNDP is that it is about development. So you see that you are working mostly in adaptation. So now let's move into the adaptation side. What do you suggest, based in your experience, it should be a focus of this climate crisis commission to address adaptation, but also to promote convergence?
Thank you. Firstly, thanks very much for having UNDP on this panel. I also want to join the panelists and others in congratulating IUCN on launching this commission. And I didn't realize it's been 50 years, you said, but it's absolutely timely, absolutely at the heart of a lot of conversations around how do we tackle these dual crises. And in a way, how does the world profoundly change how we look at nature, and nature as a means to, the climate goals, as well as the post-2020 biodiversity framework. So it's my congratulations to the Commission. And there are several ways, some of which I don't want to repeat, that was brought in absolutely on finance, the idea of market failure, policy coherence, and technology. There's a few that I wanted to highlight, some of it linked to what was said here, and I will broaden it beyond adaptation because I do work across nature, climate, energy as well. But to say, one, I think, is the work that the Commission can do around knowledge, policy advice, and thought leadership to really shift and generate a massive support, political willingness and support towards tackling. Is that me? Okay. Political support in tackling these crises together in an integrated manner, and that could manifest itself in many ways, including the coherence in terms of institutional structures and governance that was mentioned. But I think it's important through the policy advice, knowledge, and work that the Commission can do to advance that, so that we no longer hear this duality of the urgency of climate crisis, and then we will deal with nature later on, and really looking at it as an integrated and an important sort of triangulation, including with planetary health, etc., as things that we need to tackle together. So that generating policy support would be, political support would be one. A second, and again, going back to what was mentioned earlier, I'm looking forward to this classification that was mentioned on ecosystems. But this idea of mapping and understanding the valuation of ecosystems, I think, is another other area the Commission can focus on. And that would be critical. I mean, to be able to understand the mapping of hotspots and areas of dual action, the climate-nature action that can support governments, communities, and investors in their decision-making, I think will be critical across areas, for example, of where to work on regenerative agriculture and agroforestry and soil conservation. Where do we invest in protecting, restoring, and sustainably managing ecosystems, forests and peatlands and other carbon-dense ecosystems? So that work, and hopefully there's also synergies between the ecosystems work of and the Commission, as well as the Climate Commission, because obviously that mapping is going to be critical. A third area I wanted to mention, especially coming from a development angle, coming from an angle of leaving no one behind, I think it's critical that we focus on local communities, especially indigenous populations as well. I mean, 1/3 of this planet, about 43 million square kilometers, if I'm not wrong, is either governed and owned by a lot of these local communities and indigenous peoples. And while right now 90% of that is intact as region, but about a third of it, it's again, a lot of it is threatened, including by things around mining, energy production, and other industrial agriculture and other kind of conversion practices that are expected to help, whether it's an energy transition or economic growth. And I think therefore it's important for the Commission's focus along with partners to think about access to rights to these lands and waters by the indigenous peoples and communities. And I'm glad to hear the indigenous peoples mentioned earlier as well. And access to finance, and again, looking at this not just from a perspective of sort of beneficiaries, but decision makers who protect the lands and waters around them for the benefit of communities and people. And finally, I think a point that was mentioned by Carlos, and you also mentioned it, but around finance. and finance in a way that's diverted to think about nature, us working and investing in nature instead of against it, and dealing and understanding nature as a critical part of the investment and the economy, and how do we look at convergence in the various kinds of financial flows that are both international public finance, but unlocking domestic and international and private sector finance. You know, again, this links back to things around valuation of ecosystems in a way that we can crowd in finance. So I would stop there to think about, and these are all linked, and you know, the policy with the community engagement, with the finance, and understanding the science and data around ecosystems. But
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rilata, and thank you for your contribution in a very organized way that for sure it will be take into consideration when we start with our first action. So to avoid to move out of time or to run out of time, now I would like to ask you, Angela is the chair of the Ecosystem Management Commission of Ecosystem Management. And also, you have followed the process of the creation of this Climate Crisis Commission. And the point also it is to avoid overlaps, no, in between commissions. The idea it is to contribute and to collaborate. So what do you suggest to the Climate Crisis Commission that it could be developed in a collaborative way with the other 6 commissions to promote and exploit the convening power of IUCN to address the intertwined crisis?
Thank you, Manuel. I think, well, as you mentioned, IUCN already had 6 commissions, and we are all working on issues that are very much related to climate change and biodiversity. And of course, what we need to do is to enhance and increase the impact of our work, because in order to avoid overlap. So our commission on ecosystem management started many years ago working on ecosystem-based adaptation. We were one of the promoters of ecosystem-based adaptation. We have been working for many years on that. And we are also one of the founder organizations of FIBA, Friends of Ecosystem-Based Adaptation. We also have, Stuart already mentioned the work that we are doing on the red list of ecosystems and the recent launch, Global Ecosystem Typology, that provides a very relevant connection with biodiversity, but at ecosystem level, something that we in many occasions forget, and we usually refer to species, but not really to ecosystems that are really the ones who underpin the ecosystem services. And so that's an important area of work, and that we have to build connections, because climate change is already affecting the integrity of several ecosystems in the world. So this is something that we have to highlight, and we have information, and this is part of the joint work that we have to develop in the coming future. And the other important topic that I think we have to work together and is the implementation of the nature-based solutions standard that was developed by our commission together with our colleagues from the Secretariat. I think that it's very important, the topic that you mentioned on the climate change and biodiversity crisis, but I want to highlight that we are addressing several crises, not just climate change and biodiversity. We are addressing the ecosystem degradation crisis, the human health crisis, the hunger crisis, the water crisis, just to mention some of those which are very much related to the Sustainable Development Goals. So the big challenge, and this is part of the nature-based solutions standard, and we are very happy to have you on board of the International Standard Committee of Nature-Based Solutions, so it's a very good opportunity to work together. It's something that was mentioned previously, that is the need to identify and balance the trade-offs, because we are facing several trade-offs at this point, but for example, what was mentioned recently, and this is one advice that I think is very important for this new commission, is to address the transition. specifically, because this period from now until 2030 is extremely relevant. We have to really transition from the oil and gas to other types of energies, but as was mentioned before, there is a high risk of increasing trade-offs, ecological trade-offs, but also social trade-offs. We have governance trade-offs. We have different types of trade-offs, and we have to minimize them, because otherwise we will be increasing the risks in the long term. And so this is something that our commission is also working. We have a new group that is working for the last years on impact mitigation and ecological compensation, where this topic is at the core. So I wanted to highlight those topics because I think all the other commissions, the Commission on Environmental Law, the Commission on Protected Areas, the other commissions are doing a great job on climate change. So what we need is to sit and start identifying potential areas of synergies, of collaboration, to increase the impact, because that's the main mandate that we have to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. It's amazing how much the legitimacy of IUCN has contributed and has helped not only to define a clear definition of MBS, but also to move forward into the standards. And fortunately, in the current year, we have already gotten a formal recognition of UNEA 5.2 of that concept based in the IUCN 1. And we hope that we can continue doing that in this COP and in the CBD COP. So, Hindu. So when we think on indigenous people, it is clear that they have historically developed this ability of converging because of their traditional knowledge, in their ways to manage ecosystems and their lands and their territories. So based on the experience and with all what indigenous people has developed, what you could say to tell to the Climate Crisis Commission that it could be a good way to move towards convergence to address the intertwined crisis?
Thank you very much, Manuel, and hi, good morning, everyone. Happy Indigenous Women's Day, because today is the Indigenous Women's Day. So, when we just saw the discussions actually that started in France during the IUCN meeting to create this commission on climate crisis, we said well, finally IUCN is understanding the way of living of indigenous peoples. We cannot talk about biodiversity separately, land separately, and climate issues separately. It has to be interconnected. Not because we create 3 Rio Conventions that the response have to be in silo. We tried that for 27 years. And finally, people are understanding we cannot respond in silo. That was the first reactions of indigenous peoples. Because in our land territories, there is no in space that is climate change, another one biodiversity, another one land degradation. It is all in the same land, and the responses must come all at the same. So that was the first point. We are welcoming that, and we say, finally, it has to be a good solutions. Second, the Commission must understand they cannot also act separately than the other commissions who are inside the IUCN. So the other commission must integrate the climate issues and must support the climate divisions that have been created. So you must invest on it. It's not going to be the opposite side. So all the natural resources, the indigenous peoples commissions, or all of them need to integrate the climate, need to support the climate. So that's really the second thing you must do if you wanted to see a clear result. The third thing is cannot be happen without a right-based approach. We are talking about the nature. We are talking about the peoples who are living in those nature, who are protecting it forever. So the right-based approach must be the pillars who can hold all the decisions, all the solutions that can be happen. Of course, it is the place of expert, but let it be broader on the expertise. maybe on those who went to school, who have the PhDs maybe in different area of skill of the climate, but expertise of the indigenous communities who are on the ground, who are already tackling the adaptations, who are building the resilience, who are responding through the traditional knowledge, who are protecting all the oceans, forests, to reduce the greenhouse emission gases. So those are the main aspects you can take as second pillars with the human rights that can help you to achieve what the commissions are doing. The last thing all the people talk about it is about the finance. But let me give you just the examples. I said here in these pavilions 2 days ago. There was a great, announcement of 1.7 billion for indigenous-led solutions at the COP26. But when we come here, we saw the report. Through all this money, there was already 19% release. From the 100% of the 19, only 7% went to the indigenous peoples. They all 93 went to the big organizations, NGOs, governments. How are we going to respond to those who are respecting, protecting the nature forever if we do not trust them and invest on them? So the Commission must ensure the role of guardian, that the direct access funding to the indigenous peoples is happening as a reality, not just to clapping at the international level. We give funding to the indigenous peoples, and when we go to the reality, we say, well, they cannot manage it, let us give it to another organization, intermediary, and at the end we do not get the result. So you must advocate for the peoples who are fighting climate change, protecting nature, to give the direct access funding. We make the work easier for you. We work on the 10 principles for the peoples who wanted to work with the indigenous peoples to follow the principles. And that will be a direct access funding that can respect the rights, that can give the knowledge, and that can get a concrete result that we are looking for, an action on the ground. So welcome the commissions, and Manuel, as I told you, even I'm running between the 2 meetings. I cannot miss this lunch, and I will be always with you, and I will always telling you the truth if something is not working well for the indigenous people's side. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hindu, as always. So, rights-based approach and indigenous-based finance, 2 key elements that we hope we can strengthen, not only during COPs within the year, in an everyday basis, because it is clear that we do need to move toward that. So now, Kathy, you will bring that youth and gender approach because you have followed this UNFCCC process for a long time, but also you are ESG consultant with Deloitte. So based on your own experience, how do you think, or what you could tell to the Commission that it should be the way to move our action forward?
Thanks, Manuel, and great to see everyone. And of course, I'm speaking in a capacity as our Commission Steering Committee member. And first, just want to say great to see all the attention on the linkages between climate and nature and biodiversity this year with, the biodiversity there at this COP, and also with all the attention on both COP27 and COP15. And so I think what I really want to see our Commission will do going forward, of course, is recognizing and supporting and advocating for the equity of civil society stakeholders and recognizing their leadership, including youth, women and gender, and indigenous peoples. And as Hinduists here, just want to bring up an example of how we worked together in the past few years to get the first seat for the youth constituency, the gender constituency, and the second seat for the indigenous peoples constituency in the UNFCCC process at the CTC and Advisory Board. And it is a COP decision from last COP, so it does show that with the progress being made, there is possibility and there has been progress of the parties recognizing the leadership of these civil society stakeholder groups. And also what I want to see our Commission do is really to build on the work and leadership of existing youth-led, gender-led, indigenous peoples-led initiatives. And also because we're talking about IUCN, I also want to bring up another example of a collaboration between YOUNGO, which is the youth constituency of UNFCCC, Gibbon, the youth constituency of CBD, and a really amazing organization called Youth for Nature. In the past about 2 years now, we've been working together on the MBS youth position, and with the support of IUCN, actually we had so many events at the Global Youth Summit last year, at WCC in Marseille, and also with IUCN in various other events, conferences, and you know, we really gathered the inputs and opinions from young people around the world, from over 100 countries, with thousands of young people, of what's their view and concerns about the implementation of MBS by countries, by companies, and really to make sure how they can ensure that they apply the safeguards within IUCN definitions. So really you want to see that our commission can really mobilize these amazing youth-led initiatives to make sure that they're being taken into consideration and that they're being empowered and recognized. And also want to see that our work will build on the existing amazing work by the IUCN, like the various commissions, and including that there is now a strengthened youth strategy and also youth focal points on each commission, and myself is one of them at WCPA. So really want to see how we can mobilize and explore synergies within IUCN with other commissions, and also building on the amazing work from the Global Youth Summit, and also the new youth strategy, and really make sure we implement them in a meaningful way. And of course, talking about that Carlos was here. We're actually at an event of Jeff yesterday talking about transparency. And I think it's absolutely critical that we also explore ways how we can support Jeff, GCF, and AF in terms of their work within the UNFCCC processes, or other constituted bodies of UNFCCC, for example, FCBA's work with the Technology Executive Committee on coastal region adaptation approaches, and also all the other amazing activities going on within the space. And of course, really want to see, just to summarize, that how the Commission can really support and recognize equitable leadership of these civil society stakeholders, and also to build linkages between policy and on-the-ground action, and of course also to recognize, for example, like Carlos was saying about financial support, and also how we can provide capacity building, and how we can provide financial support, technical support to these communities working on the ground.
Thank you very much, Kathy. So being aware of time, we won't have time to wrap up, but based in Hindu's words, just one phrase: please support, help, join the Commission in their efforts, and if we are not going in the right direction, tell us. Tell us, please, as following Hindu's phrase. Thank you, Hindu, Cirilata, Adair, Kathy, Angela, and Carlos Manuel, and for you all for this launching of the new steward for the new Climate Crisis Commission. Thank you.